Jonny from Uport, and do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Yeah. So I am Jonny. I'm a product designer at Uport. Uport's part of Consensus, so I also do a lot of design, kind of evangelism and product design, education in the space just on behalf of Consensus. But on Uport, I lead product design, and I've been on, I think, just about a year yesterday since I joined the project, and then before Uport, I worked and I was a lead product designer at IBM working on Hyperledger and their supply chain solutions, which produced their big Maersk project and their Walmart project. So I worked on that, and then a little bit before that I was writing my thesis on design and blockchain. And so kind of been in this whole what does design mean and blockchain, this whole space, thinking about it for about three and a half years now.
That's great. Well, it'd be great to get your insights on where identity is moving in the blockchain space. So, the existing protocols that we know, like OAuth, and so how is blockchain shifting that playing field?
Right. Yeah. So OAuth, the way conceptually what's happening with OAuth is Facebook has some data store of you, right? All of your information, the type of stuff that you can go download now because of the GDPR laws. All of that they have, and then when you do OAuth, you're telling Pinterest, for instance, you're telling Facebook, or giving Pinterest a token, I think, to tell Facebook that the user has said that I can see their data, send it to me. And so the user is just the authenticator, right? They are not really the owner, right? They're licensing their own data kind of from Facebook. So what we want to do is just take that entire store of data that Facebook has, take it off of their servers in a way, and put it on the user's device or their own cloud storage that's encrypted by their private key. And so when you want to take your Facebook data and share it with Pinterest, you log into Pinterest with what we would say log in with Uport, and they ask you for your Facebook data and you give it to them, not giving Facebook permission to send it to them. And so that is how we keep the network effects going, right? We don't have to, because that's the thing that makes the web super valuable, is the ability to share data across these platforms. And so we want to make sure that we don't run into this world where you have a new account for every decentralized application, and you have just an identity on that one, right? So I have an identity on UJO, I have an identity on Gitcoin and on Civil. We don't want that. We want you just to have one single source, and you can move all of that data through them as you see fit. So that's kind of the vision. Yeah.
So you're advocating an identity that is doesn't belong to Facebook, but that Facebook would recognize, and that Pinterest would recognize.
Right.
Or where would you initiate that identity? I mean, would there have to be some kind of provider for that? Or?
So using Facebook and Pinterest as an example could be misleading. I don't think that this will, they will adopt this, but if you think of the Peepith or something, the decentralized versions of Pinterest or Facebook in the future, this is what we would like to see. So establishing identity, so the verification after you've created, right? So you create an identity that's just storing a username as an entry in a database or on the chain or in a DID document on IPFS. That's just making an entry, and nobody knows what it's tied to. Then verification comes, and that's the real thing where it's how do we tie this to a human? They need to verify something about themselves. So I think, and I said it in my talk earlier, that a lot of people have this idea that self-sovereignty is going to get rid of all of these third parties, right? We don't need the banks anymore and all this stuff. I don't think that that's what's going to happen, and I don't think that's what needs to happen. What self-sovereignty, I would contend, is that it's just the ability to move your data at will, easily, right? And control access. So I still want to benefit from my reputation with Chase Bank. I still want to benefit from my reputation with my school or my state, and those are valuable pieces of identity I have. So I don't want to. I don't want to get rid of all that, right? I just want to be able to do what I want with it, right? And so we did a partnership with Zug Switzerland, and citizens were able to go to the city hall, show their documentation like they were getting a license, and instead of getting they did get the license, but they also were able to scan a QR code at the counter, which issued them a digital version of that ID to their U-port address, right? And now they can do whatever they want with it. They don't have to carry that paperwork around. If they went to a border, in theory, that border officer into another country doesn't have to, if there's any dispute, they don't have to call Zug Systems, right, and say, hey, do you know this person? You have the signed credential on you, right? It's like carrying an entire notary with you at all times, essentially. So that I still think ultimately the trust network resolves to real world anchors and real world identities, right? So I don't think that those are going away, but I just think they're going to become much less they're just going to be accountable far more to users, because they hopefully they'll be able to just switch to a new platform, and the ability to transfer your reputation is really the like driving down of switching cost, right? So building reputation in some ecosystem, as you invest more, it's inversely correlated to the switching cost, right? And that's what Facebook loves, and that's what Twitter loves, and that's what Uber loves, right? So if we get rid of their ability to control that switching cost, they become much more accountable to what users want to do with their identity and what services they want to use.
Gotcha. So the OAuth protocol sort of evolved from what was previously SAML and then OIDC, and do you think it will evolve to kind of meet these requirements, or do you think we have to abandon what we currently use?
So as this is probably one of the edge areas of my knowledge, but as far as I know from our work with the Decentralized Identity Foundation and our work on collaborating and creating these standards called a DID, a decentralized identifier, and that will be hopefully that is supposed to be chain agnostic and legacy system like compatible. I don't know the inner workings of what that compatibility looks like on the technical side, but I do know that it is a goal to not just abandon these things in like overnight. There's I don't know, I haven't heard anything about what OAuth and some of these legacy systems want to do and what they think and what their roadmap is for this type of stuff. I got to imagine that they're doing something though, and yeah, I think a lot of the things that did work with OAuth are guiding the way the standards are being built for in the DIF. So yeah, I think that's about all I know about kind of the state of what OAuth is doing.
Yeah. So do you get a sense that there's different players in this identity space that are pushing the evolution to go in different directions that have different motives? And is it a little bit of a battle? What are you seeing in that regard?
Yeah, so we touched on this idea of like trust anchors in the real world, right? And so there's two kind of ways to approach adoption, I guess. So like Sovereign, the Sovereign Network Foundation they also have a product called Evernym. I think Evernym, Sovereign's a product of Evernym, or Evernym's a product of Sovereign. I can't remember which one's under which, but they have like a group, I forgot what they call them, a group of trusted entities around the world who will do like that initial verification step and be these validators of identities. So that is centralization to some degree, which UPort is trying to avoid. Like, I think that the way we're going is we're probably the most, or at least I feel like probably the furthest like committed to the decentralization and these principles. So maybe idealistic, right? Like and then there's more practical solutions that are trying to work today and work well with the current system a little bit better. And I think Sovereign is one of those. Blockstack is interesting because they've built an entire chain on top of Bitcoin. I think it's like pegged to Bitcoin. But they've built this entire application and kind of ecosystem that lives inside of a downloadable browser that gives you your identity. And so it's like a whole full scale solution, right? It's like the future in an operating system, and you get an identity. It's built in. So that's another interesting thing, but that requires developers, to build for Blockstack, and it's a whole different thing, right? And I'm a big believer in network effects and trying to get apps to be able to leverage other apps to be able to leverage other ones, so you get these feedback loops, and that's how you get adoption. So I see Ethereum being the best position to do that, so that's why I think what we're working on is really important. Blockstack, I think, runs into that problem maybe a little bit more of like, I don't know how many people are building apps on Blockstack. And then you have something like Civic, who is tokenized heavily, and essentially I think their model is a organization, company wants to verify a user, they can pay in tokens to a validator, kind of like how Sovereign has these trusted validators, to validate that information for them about that user so that they can log in and do whatever. And so it's this tokenized thing. But that also, again, requires this kind of closed economy of you have to be operating with the Civic tokens, right? And I don't know how your Civic identity that's running on these Civic tokens and in the Civic system ends up, if it can and easily interoperate with all of the cool applications that are being built on Ethereum, right? Like that's ultimately, as a user, what I want to use my identity for, right? I want to use it on the new Facebook and the new Spotify and all those new things, right? So, and then there's ERC 725, which is a proposed standard, and we've also proposed a couple. I think ours is like 780, and then we also have 1056. I think those numbers can be wrong. But 725 is an idea to create an on-chain claims registry. So when I create a smart contract that is my identity, and then people can make claims to it on-chain publicly. There's two problems there. One, creating identities as smart contracts costs gas in a way that key pairs don't, and so onboarding becomes a problem. And then also privacy is a huge issue because those claims are going to be on-chain permanent forever, so I'm not sure that that's even GDPR compliant, right? So there's no right to erasure after that. If somebody says this person went to this school, or this person is married to somebody else, or whatever it is, right? Like that stuff that should not be on the chain. So
okay, so the ERC 725 is somewhat of a controversial proposal, or is the community split on that?
Yeah, I don't think it's like, it hasn't been like, I mean, I know Fabian, and Uport knows Fabian who wrote it. He also wrote ERC 20. Yeah, I think it's just a different proposal, and Uport just has a different, just thinks the privacy part is something that we're not willing to compromise on, and I'm not sure legally we should or can, right? So I don't know what the current state of adoption of 725 is, and I think that there even could be, I guess, kind of, you take 725 and you modify it in some way to solve this privacy issue. So maybe you just take the chain or the identity creation part, and you still do your chain or claims off chain or something like that. So I don't know that it has like no utility or something like that. I think maybe there are some workable pieces to it, but yeah. So we'll see what happens. Nothing has really emerged as a standard, and for that reason, there's been just so many people coming into this identity space that are not originally identity products, right? So, MetaMask is getting involved just because people, you can sign in using MetaMask now on Ujo, and I know like Civil is doing their identity thing, and Gitcoin is using like some GitHub stuff, and then Status is coming in with their own kind of a version of it, and then I know Trust Wallet has some ideas, and so like and I'm Token too. So like, there's just like a lot of people are so anxious to figure this out because it is such a fundamental layer to making all of this stuff work that everybody's just they get to where they're ready to scale. They're ready to like go big time, and the last piece is this identity thing, and nobody's really figured it out yet, and the standard hasn't emerged, and we're trying to make one emerge. And so we just have it's very fractured in terms of like perspective and initiatives right now.
Okay. And how soon do you see this entering the political sphere? I mean, I've already seen discussions from the political side in legislation of how identity will play a factor with blockchain. But do you think they're waiting for a standard to emerge, or do you think they'll have their own system, or have you heard any discussions?
Yeah, I mean
like when it comes to voting in the future,
right?
Or
so
IDs.
Voting is one of the. The realist thing I know about is our Zug pilot where they conducted a vote using these IDs, and it was on some city amendment or policy or something, and I think they actually used the identity UPort for the identity piece and Hyperledger for the voting piece, so they had some interoperability there, right? And at least at the application level, and I don't know. I mean, I hear it being talked about a lot. It's voting and the refugee identity problem are the two big ones that really drive home the identity problem. And there's lots of work on, lots of like speculation and papers and things on both of them. I haven't seen anything like really materialize. I've seen a lot of pilots. I know that like Cambridge blockchain ran, I think it was Cambridge blockchain, they ran like back in the last election, they ran like a shadow election voting for the Libertarian Party on the blockchain, and that was interesting. But the voting thing has this extra little twist in the privacy space that we haven't figured out how to solve yet, which is you gotta be confident, right? You as a voter, you want to, one, be able to identify that you are a person allowed to vote in this election. You then want to be able to cast your vote without anybody knowing who you voted for, and then you want to have some certainty that your vote got counted for the right candidate, right? So when you just drop a piece of paper in a ballot box, anybody could take your votes out and pour them in another box or whatever, right? Not count them or something like that. And so the last piece of it is you don't want the voter to have the ability to prove who they voted for to anybody else, because then you get a market. And so if we give you a receipt and you say you just like see the your hash of your vote and only you know that that's you, and it's sitting there in the wallet of the candidate and that's on chain, and you can verify that that's yours, well, that's almost good enough, but it's that last little piece where I can say, look, I can prove to you that my vote was counted for that person. You have to, which is like kind of antithetical to blockchain in a way. It's like this so I think that is like this very unique problem to voting that has to be solved that I don't know. I mean, obviously people say stuff like zero knowledge proofs, homomorphic encryption, and all of this stuff, but that just really hasn't happened yet. So that's, and then I think your question about the political sphere and like just more broadly how it'll affect public civic life and policy. I really want to see blockchain explored for like our immigration and e-verify system, and like how it could just, I think that's for me, that's always seemed like one of the big issues to solve, is like we wouldn't have all of these problems if it didn't take a lawyer and a whole team of people and 3 years to do immigration, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, we can do the vetting if people have these credentials like in seconds, right? And I think that is like a huge thing that I think that's a good use case to explore, because one, there's like a desperate need to try something because nothing's really working, and then it's at a smaller scale than like giving a national identity. But Estonia, they did their e-residency, and so the entire country of Estonia has like, I don't know, it was very early in this space, but I don't know exactly what their architecture is, but it's a blockchain-backed e-residency program. And then I think that there's a couple others. There's stuff happening in Canada, there's stuff happening in Illinois, but yeah, I see a lot of the projects actually being these identity layers just being built purely as an identity layer, and like not on Ethereum specifically or something, and not with the idea that there will be all these apps on it. It's just like just an identity thing, right? And I don't know how I feel about that, because again, this network effects thing that I really think is the driver, right? And I don't want to, I think that's what humans want, right? They want to be able to use their identity the way they want to use it. Not, we're going to build this whole system for you to use your identity because we want you to only be able to use it with us. So we're going to tell you like what you can kind of build this narrow use case for you to use your identity. That's not self-sovereignty. And so yeah, I know those things are happening. It's kind of like the same type of debate a little bit between public and private chains, right? I think that this identity built inside of these robust ecosystems is probably better than these narrow identity use cases.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you have anything else you want to add to?
I think the only other thing is, something I've been thinking about in terms of, it's more on the design side, is I think as I see like dApps mature and they're able to be used, right? Like, so I think Gitcoin has done 700 bounties, Ujo's live on mainnet, Gnosis is live, Augur's live, CryptoKitties, Aragon, like some of these projects are out there and you can use them now. And we see, I think it's like less than 10,000 users a day on dApps right now. If you go to DApp Radar, the numbers are pretty abysmal. And my intuition is that is a user experience or a product design problem. Like, you've built the technology works and nobody's using it. So what's the issue, right? And if we want to see this, if you're familiar with like the diffusion of innovations curve, right? Your early adopters or your innovators, early adopters, early majority. I think we are approaching the precipice of the chasm, and that's the make or break time. And I think in the book, Crossing the Chasm, a lot of times they propose, kind of the general thesis is the proposed solution is marketing to cross the chasm. And I think it's design, right? Like, I think it's user experience and product design is what's going to bridge us across that chasm, because everybody right now uses all these products because of their novelty. And the early majority uses them because it's practical, right? And So yeah, I just think, and I know a lot of the other apps out there are really doing great jobs of heavily investing in product design status, for instance. And yeah, I think we're there. I think it's time for more designers in the space. I think we take so much stuff for granted working in this high-tech space for years building this product, and like you forget how atrocious it is to even see a seed phrase, right? You forget how painful that is for somebody who is, 45 and has been working, some non-tech job, right? But could benefit from whatever this is, right? Like getting a loan through Dharma or something like that. That's the bridge we have to cross. Like, it's not that the technology is broken and it's not working. People aren't using it because they can't use it, right? And that's just a human problem. So we still have the scalability issues on the rise. So even if we had a whole flood of people, who knows if we would even be able to support it? But we're not even pushing the limits of our scalability most of the times right now. And we have, so we're not even. CryptoKitties was like one of the last things, a couple of other exchange type of things, but CryptoKitties was the only consumer application, I think, to like push the capacity of the Ethereum network, for instance. So, yeah, I think I just think that seems apparent to me that if you want to see your Ether or whatever coin 10x again, it's not going to be because 10 times more software developers got interested in the space. It's going to be because 10 times more regular people finally could use whatever you're building. So that's
boils down to user experience. Or
I know I'm a lot of times it's thought of last, and I'm a very big advocate of having even when you're just there thinking about the idea and wondering if this is a good thing to build, is a prediction market for this a good idea? Like, design should be part of these conversations up front. So yeah, that would be my last thing to leave with, a call to action for more designers to get into the space and to realize it is what's going to drive the adoption that's going to make us all money and successful and have save the world and do all these things, is because we've made it so it can be used by the people, right? So yeah, that would be my final thing.
Great. Well, thank you very much, John.
Yeah, it's great. Thanks.
All right.